More than half of all Californians will be eligible for a new stimulus check of up to $1,050. So we're going to talk about what it takes to be eligible for this stimulus check, when you can expect to receive them, and also how to calculate out how much you could qualify for. But first, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I do short videos like this all the time, unedited, unscripted, just bringing you news so you can stay up to date on topics like this. So this is going to be a record-setting direct payment from any state. Of course, we had the government sending out stimulus checks about a year and a half ago, which most Americans have received at this point, although there are still a few out there who haven't received their initial stimulus checks. But we're now receiving state direct payments to help offset some of the inflation. So Governor Gavin Newsom of California is using some of the $97 billion California budget surplus to be able to send out these direct payments to tax filers within the state. That's going to be important later on in the distinction between what he was originally trying to get direct payments sent to versus what we ended up with as a compromise. So the entire package is estimated to cost California $17 billion, with $9.5 billion of that cost coming from direct inflation relief stimulus checks to its citizens. So Newsom is pitching this stimulus as a middle-class rebate. However, the income brackets go relatively high in comparison to what most of us would consider middle class. So there's three income tiers that you need to know about, and we're going to break down each of those. Single tax filers will receive $350 if they earn less than $75,000, $250 if they earn between $75,000 and $125,000, and $200 direct payments if they earn between $125,000 and $250,000. That is for single people. Now, joint tax filers will actually earn a bit more, so they'll earn $700 if they earn less than $150,000 combined, $500 if they earn between $150,000 and $250,000, and then $400 if they earn between $250,000 and $500,000. So if you're earning over the $500,000 mark as joint tax filers, you won't actually receive a direct payment stimulus check. And if you're earning over $250,000 as a single filer, you won't receive the direct payment stimulus check. Now, if single or joint filers have a dependent, then they will actually receive either $350, $250, or $200 based on which of the three tiers they're in. So obviously, if you're in the lowest tier with the under $75,000 as a single taxpayer, or under $150,000 as joint taxpayer, then you'll receive that $350. If you're in the middle tier, so between $75,000 and $125,000 as a single taxpayer, or between $150,000 and $250,000 as a joint taxpayer, you'll receive an extra $250 for having a dependent. And if you're in the top tax tier or the top income tier, between $125,000 and $250,000 as a single tax filer, and between $250,000 and $500,000 as joint tax filers, you'll receive $200 for having a dependent. Keep in mind, if you're over that amount, over $250,000 as a single tax filer or $500,000 as a joint tax filer, you'll receive none of the dependent increase, because you'll also receive none of the direct payment in general. So here's how the amounts received will break down if you have a dependent. So a single tax filer with one dependent at the lowest income tier then would receive $700, while joint filers with one dependent would receive about $1,050, which is the highest amount that you would expect to earn. Now, a single tax filer with one dependent in the second income tier that we've already mentioned would receive $500, while joint tax filers would receive $750. And a single filer with one dependent in the third income tier would receive $400, while joint tax filers would receive in the third income tier with one dependent $600. So overall, there are about 500,000 tax filers that are above the income limits for single tax filers and for joint tax filers that will not receive a rebate in California. Now, Governor Newsom had originally asked that these payments be sent to registered vehicle owners, as there's millions of Californians who don't file tax returns or aren't required to file tax returns. But he ended up having to compromise with the state legislation to ultimately make the payments directly to those who had filed taxes. So when can you expect to receive your direct payments from California. As of right now, we would expect for the direct deposits to be sent in October. Now, if you don't file or if you don't receive a direct deposit on your tax returns for the state of California, then you would ultimately be mailed a debit card to the last known file on address for you, and that would also be in October. So there are some politicians within the state's government that are angry at the size of the stimulus check, noting essentially that top politicians and Federal Reserve members are blaming the direct payments that Americans had already received from the federal level for a lot of the inflationary issues that we're seeing, saying that essentially by sending out more direct payments, especially to the largest state in the union, that we could ultimately cause more inflationary pressure. But Governor Newsom has fired back and said that essentially families need help now, and it's up to the federal government and to the Federal Reserve to find policies that will bring down inflation so that families don't have to receive direct payments and they can just go back to their standard budgeting practices. But in the short term, he wants to help out the citizens of California. Now, it's not clear exactly what sort of repercussions we will see from this. That's a huge amount of money overall to hit the economy. We've got $17 billion that will essentially be put back in Californians' pockets, but that is a small drop in the bucket in comparison to the almost $1 trillion that we saw in direct payments from the federal government. So it won't technically be as inflationary as we saw with what we had from the federal government's direct payments, but there certainly will be some issues that will arise from this. But Governor Newsom is essentially saying that the immediate help that families need is going to trump any sort of inflationary pressures that we see, and hopefully what we're seeing from the federal government and Federal Reserve coming through the pipeline in terms of legislation will ultimately pull back a lot of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing from other sides of things, which means that this may not have as much of an impact. Now, Dylan Grunman O'Neill, who's a senior state policy analyst at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, says that it seems what everybody wants from their state lawmakers right now is help reconciling and addressing the fact that many families are really struggling with inflation and other pressures while state budgets and corporate profits are doing well. There are some other states who have considered direct payments to their citizens, but many states right now, instead of taking the direct payment route, are actually taking smaller routes like eliminating gas taxes. During this proposal, part of the $17 billion in cost of the state of California will be the removal of the diesel tax, but Governor Newsom has actually refused to remove the state tax on gasoline because he says that it would eliminate thousands of construction jobs and would also put the highway system of the state into disrepair because a lot of those taxes go to paying things like funding highway programs that upkeep the highways. So Governor Newsom is essentially taking the direct payment route, and many states are likely going to take this and see how it ultimately plays out. Many state legislations have already wrapped up for the year. Some of them do it as early as March. California extends their state legislation through the middle of the year, but they're running up on deadlines. So assuming that this gets passed, we could ultimately see direct payments or debit cards sent to Californians in October, and many states will take note of how this plays out for potentially putting similar moves into motion in 2023. So I hope this video brought you some value. I try to keep it as simple as possible. One take, no cutting, no editing, just bringing you facts. If you appreciate that, again, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like on the video, and leave some comments down below on other topics you'd love to see covered. Of course, I try to cover the most up-to-date information. This was just news from last Friday and rolling over into this week on how the direct payments will ultimately be handled, but I try to bring news as quickly as we can get it. I really appreciate you stopping by. Catch you in the next one.